Hi, my name is Jarno and I'm your event tutor. My YouTube channel is all about teaching you how to plan and organize an event or festival. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel or leave a comment below. But first, enjoy this video. Right, I'm here with Sarah Perryman from the Brighton Fringe. And Sarah, can you introduce yourself? Can you tell us something about Brighton Fringe and about your role within the Fringe organisation?
Sure. My name's Sarah Perryman. I'm the Participation and Development Manager for Brighton Fringe, which means I look after all our artists, venue managers and visiting arts industry professionals. And Brighton Fringe is England's largest open access arts festival.
And when does Brighton Fringe take place?
Every year we run for a month in May. Brighton Fringe 2017 will be the 5th of May to the 4th of June.
What does it actually mean, Fringe?
So fringe means on the outskirts, so not involved in the main thing, and fringe festivals came about as a reaction to curated festivals. So in Edinburgh, the International Festival, in Brighton, Brighton Festival, where artists are invited and paid to bring their work into a festival, and it's not open to everybody. And artists decided that wasn't all right with them, and so they turned up next door, literally, and put on their own events, and that's how Fringe tends to start. So we talk about it in terms of open access, which means anyone can put on an event. There's no judgment, there's no curation, there's no criteria to take part. So we've had participants who are 9 years old and participants in their 80s and everything in between.
And within Brighton Fringe, how many events are you talking about? How many events are taking place within the Fringe?
So this year we had 936 events in 175 venues, roughly 3,500 performances. We're expecting over 1,000 events for Brighton Fringe 2017.
And how many visitors do come to Brighton Fringe?
Roughly 500,000, we think, across the whole festival.
That's spread out over a month to the different events. And when you start planning these kind of events, where do you actually start? So you just said the Fringe takes place in May. Yeah. When do you start planning for that event?
At least a year before, probably about 18 months in advance. So before we've finished one Fringe, we're already working on the next one to give ourselves enough time. So the first thing we do, obviously, is set the dates for the following Fringe and then work backwards from that.
And after you've set the date, so then what? What are the key things that you should, you should think of when you start planning a Fringe?
Sure. So the things that we work backwards from are, so when the Fringe happens, then we figure out when we want tickets to go on sale, which is normally the end of February, the beginning of March. So that affects when we need our brochure and our website to go live at roughly that time. Working backwards from that, we have to have a deadline for artists to apply, which is towards the end of January. Before that, we have an early bird deadline in December for registrations. And then before that, in October, we actually open the registration process so people can start registering their events.
And you say your tickets go on sale in February, so that's 3 months ahead of the actual event. Is there a specific reason why 3 months, or?
Just the longer you're on sale, the more ticket sales you can hope for before the event opens. Obviously, we'll always have audiences who just buy on the day, which is great, but it's also nice to be able to see who's going to what in advance.
So normally an event works with objectives, so you set yourself some goals that you want to achieve. How does that work for the Fringe? What kind of objectives do you guys work towards?
Sure. So we're a registered charity, so our constitution says we have to have objectives, which is basically about enhancing the lives of people in Brighton and Hove and further afield through the arts and drama, but also assisting artists to showcase their work to those audiences. So we've got a dual responsibility to our audiences and our artists. And so
how do you measure that objective of, especially the ones towards the audience? You already said you've got 500,000 people visiting your event. Is that part of how you measure that specific objective, or are there other indicators for that?
Yeah, so numbers is one thing, but also the quality of their experience is important to us. So we ask our audiences for their feedback every year. What did they like about the Fringe? What could we improve? So that they feel that they have some ownership on how we move forward. So it's not just about, you know, more bums on seats. It's about everyone enjoying the Fringe and making the most of it. And maybe if you've only been to one event last year, can we get you to go to 2 or 3 this year? So there's some audience development work that can go into that side of things.
And how do you ask for feedback? I've been to conferences, for example, where you get an email 3 days afterwards, where they ask you to fill in a survey, or I've been to events where they actually stand outside with a clipboard and do it that way. What would you advise?
It really depends on the scale that you're working on. I think what works really well for us is if individual events seek feedback from their audiences as well. So they're getting direct feedback on their one event. It's much harder for us to gather that information across 900 or 1,000 events. So our feedback is an email survey because we can't physically go out and ask 500,000 people what they think. So it's an email about the Fringe in general as an entire festival, whereas what venues or artists tend to do, hopefully, is get some feedback from their audiences directly about the content of their show and that side of things. But we also get, comments from people who come by and will tell us about a show that they loved or things like that.
Okay. I just walked into your office here. There's quite a few people working away. Can you tell us a little bit more about your team, how important it is, the different roles that you have within your event management team, and how you have established all these different roles?
Sure. So we have a team that kind of concertinas in size through the year, which is quite common for festivals because there are busier times of the year. So we actually only have 3 full-time year-round paid members of staff, and then about another 8 part-time year-round members of staff, and then obviously seasonal staff for our box office and things when we go on sale, and during the Fringe we're much busier, and we rely on volunteers a lot during the festival as well. So the main areas are participation, so looking after the people that actually put on the events, our marketing team, so making sure that we're attracting audiences. Our box office team sits slightly separate from that to manage the actual ticket sales, and within our marketing team we also have people looking after our own events, so our outdoor showcasing and press as well, and sales.
So you just mentioned you've got 3 staff members full-time.
Yeah.
During the Fringe, obviously, you already mentioned you've got loads of volunteers. Yeah. Do you have any idea how many volunteers do you have during that month?
Roughly 120.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Were you thinking more?
I was thinking more, actually. Yeah.
The venues also have their own volunteers as well. So over the entire festival, it's probably a lot more. But working directly for us, it's probably 120 to 150. Yeah.
Okay. So obviously you organise the overall Fringe. Sure. Within the Fringe, you have different sites that have their own area with different events. Are they working for you? Are they working on a contract? Are they working separately? How does that actually work?
So the venues are separate organisations from us. If you think of the Fringe as an umbrella organisation, it's kind of a branding exercise in that sense. They don't work for us directly. We work in partnership with them to make these events happen.
How does that work with responsibility? So normally, the event organizer is responsible. Yeah. Where does your responsibility begin and where does it actually end?
So we have from my point of view.
Let's say I'm going to organize an event for within the Fringe.
Sure. Are you a participant as in an artist, or are you a venue manager? Because there's a distinct difference.
Let's say I am the artist.
Okay.
But I'm organising it within a venue that takes part in the Fringe.
Great. So my responsibility to you is to help you through the process, either of finding that venue or making sure they know everything that we need from them in terms of the details of the space, that we've got the right contact details and address and all that really boring stuff. And then help you get the show registered, hopefully talk you through any additional support you might need, talk to you about what your goals are for your event. So are you looking to get press coverage? Do you want to take your event on somewhere else afterwards? What are your goals, and how can we help you reach them?
Do my goals need to be in line with the goals of the Fringe?
No. As long as they're not anything unethical or illegal, it's fine. So we have people doing events for all different sorts of reasons. Some people are hobbyists who just like, there might be a part-time music maker who just does one gig a year and then goes back to their office job. We have a lot of, obviously, professional artists and performers, and we're part of their annual work. We have a lot of international artists, but also we work with local businesses and local charities who are putting on an event to raise their public profile. So it might be a charity working with homeless people who'll do a drop-in cafe or a walking tour, or all sorts of different reasons why people put on events.
And responsibility-wise, obviously there's the question of insurance and liability. How does that work for an event like the Fringe?
So we have, obviously we're insured as an organisation and as a festival, but everybody involved, if you think of it as a pyramid, so Brighton Fringe Limited at the top, the venues also need to be covered for their spaces and what happens in those spaces, and then the artists need to be covered for the content of their event and anything they might be, any risk they might be causing to staff or audience members.
What kind of insurance or liability, what are we talking about then?
So the obvious one is public liability insurance, because if you're inviting members of the public in to see your work, you have a responsibility to them. But the other important one is employers' liability. Even if you're not paying the people that you're working with, you still need cover in case one of your actors is hurt in a rehearsal or anything like that. And another good one, if you've got really expensive sets or props or costumes or, gear, technical equipment, is to have some sort of insurance for your kit.
Why is it, especially with liability insurance, why is it so important? So again, I will organize a show as part of the Fringe, and doing my show, one of my speakers falls over and falls on the leg of one of my, exactly. So am I then responsible, or is it the responsibility of the venue, or
that speaker in that space? So if it's your speaker that you've brought into someone else's venue, you're liable because the venue didn't provide that speaker. If it's part of the kit that came with the venue, then you can argue that it's the venue's responsibility.
So what kind of advice would you give to any new aspiring event planners when it comes to that kind of stuff? Because it's quite important that they, obviously look into this. Where do they start to make sure that they have all the right paperwork ready?
So I would talk to the venue that you're working with. It's perfectly fine to ask them what their insurance covers and what it doesn't, and then to look at whether you need your own separate insurance. We work with an insurance company who have a very good package specifically aimed at Fringe events, low budget. It's not very expensive, but it gives them all the cover they need for their time at the Fringe.
So your event starts in May, beginning of May. When do you start setting up the event site?
So we don't have a central event site as such. We use different spaces across the city, roughly 175 every year. So some of those are year-round venues, so theatres that have got shows going on all the time. Some of them are pubs, some of them are people's houses. We've had shows in public toilets, baths, swimming pools, beach huts, telephone boxes, you name it. But some of our bigger venues are sort of pop-up sites where, a Spiegel tent will appear. Or several theatre spaces will appear on a site. They actually go up really late in the day. They tend to go up the week before we open, so it's quite last minute. But it's nice to watch these things emerging around the city. You think, yeah, Fringe is coming.
That's the beauty of event planning.
Absolutely.
So when they set up in one of the parks or even on the beach, for example, what goes in first? What are the steps when you look at an event site and you think, okay, well, do I start with the fencing? Do I start with the tent? Or do the toilets come in first? What comes in first, basically?
Having permission comes in first. So liaising with the council normally happens about 6 months in advance. So we're in November now. Most of the council applications going in at the moment for any of our pop-up sites, so that if anyone's got any objections, that can all be sorted through. And then usually it's the fencing that goes up first so that the site is secure. Some of the sites are quite big, and obviously expensive kit is coming onto sites. So you usually see fencing go up and security guards appear first, and then things like toilets and the actual venues themselves and all the nice things that make them pretty after that.
And all of that happens within a week?
Yes, yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
So Brighton Fringe has quite a lot of sponsors. How important is sponsorship for the Fringe?
For us, it's really important. Although we're a charity, we only receive about 3% of our income from public subsidy, so our local authority, trusts and foundations. So there's a lot of money to raise each year. We do charge registration fees from the artists, but that only covers about a quarter of the money that we need. So sponsorship makes up a big gap in the difference. And without sponsors, Brighton Fringe would be a very different type of event and organisation.
And the sponsors that you have, did you find them or did they find you? If you did find them, how did you approach them? What were the key things to do that?
I think we've approached all of our sponsors. I can't think of anyone that's knocked on our door and said, would you like some cash? Although if anyone would like to, please do. So it's really about thinking from their point of view of what they've got to gain from working for us. So it's not about begging for money, it's about a mutually beneficial partnership where we get some financial support and other things as well. There's quite often in-kind support offered as well, but that they're getting something that they're looking for. So it's finding out what their objectives are. So it might be that they want to reach a particular audience group that we're good at attracting, or that they just want to raise their brand awareness with our audience generally, and figuring out where the two organisations meet.
When you approach a sponsor, do you normally, what is your main objective? To raise money, or is it to come up with some kind of partnership with them, or how do you?
Everything we do is in partnership. So we work in partnership with our artists, with our venues, with our audiences, and with our sponsors. So although we need money, it's about building a relationship with that person and seeing. So quite often we'll work with a partner on a sponsor on a smaller scale in the first year while we're still kind of dating, and then we see if we're going to get serious, and that might develop in future years. So there's always an ongoing progression.
If someone is watching this who thinks, you know what, I want to organise my own event or my own festival next year, I need sponsors for that. Mm-hmm. What would be the key thing that, what kind of advice would you give them?
Think about what's in it for the sponsor. Don't think about what you need, although obviously you need to know what you need. You need to pitch to them in terms of what can they gain from working with you. Sorry.
Right, so you have organised events.
Yes.
What, according to you, what do you think makes a good event planner?
Thoroughness, attention to detail, research, asking lots of questions, and being very clear in your mind about what you're trying to achieve.
What is your main advice for anyone starting out in the events industry?
Go to a lot of events. It's amazing how many people I meet who want to work in the industry but don't go to events and festivals and conferences or whatever area they want to work in, or go and get work experience, go and volunteer on festivals to find out what part of it you like, and to build up your experience.
Perhaps a bit of an obvious question, but why do they need to go to any kind of event?
To see how different people do it, to look at the different scales of events, and to figure out what they like and what they don't like.
And I think that's a really good one, because if you go to an event that you think, hang on a minute, this doesn't work properly, you in your mind can figure out how you would do things differently, and how you can improve it. And that's how you learn for your own event. Absolutely. I think.
You can learn as much from an event that you don't think is managed very well as you can from an event that you really enjoyed and admired.
Why should people come to the Brighton Fringe in 2017?
We're expecting over 1,000 events. We're talking theatre, dance, music, cabaret, film, events, literature, spoken word, visual arts, workshops, talks, you name it, we've got it. Just takes over the city. Brighton's a great place to be during the summer anyway, and it's a great way to see lots of exciting different work for relatively cheap ticket prices.
Sarah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. My name is Jarno, your event tutor. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and do check out my other videos. See you next time.